What if many of the diagnostic labels that we throw around, like neurodivergence or sensory processing disorder or oppositional defiance, are actually harming our children? What if we're using them sloppily, lacklusterly, and what if it's actually not helping us in our parenting? Today, we're going to explore these therapeutic terminologies, why we use them, what we mean, and what we could say instead, how we could think about childhood development in perhaps a more helpful way. Welcome back to the show. This is Hi Fam. I'm Avital. I'm the founder and I'm the mother of 5. I'm here to help you to build a strong family culture, to love parenting and to parent from love, and to create family bliss. If all of that sounds good to you, then please hit the subscribe button, slam the like button, the notification bell, all the different algorithmic things. Feed that algorithm to help me to grow this show and to help you to make sure never to miss an episode in the future, because this kind of thing is what's going to help you to feel like a real badass mom, like someone who is capable, confident, strong, knows what they're about, and is building the future that they believe in inside of their homes. So last episode, we discussed all of the ways that diagnostic or therapeutic language can harm our families. I gave you 10 reasons that we should be careful when we use diagnostic labels, when we describe childhood development, our marriages, ourselves. And today, we're going to dive into that first one, to childhood development. We're going to go a little bit deeper and peel back the layers of the onions, because I want to train your eyes to see the way that culture is inundating us and really training us to pick up on pathologies, on diagnoses, on dysfunction, on disorder, even when they're not there. So first, let's just disclaim and say, sometimes they are there. Sometimes early intervention is really important. Sometimes your child does have a syndrome, an illness, a developmental disorder, and they do need the therapy and the help, the physio, the occupational therapy, the speech therapy, whatever it might be. And those interventions could be life-changing and life-saving. And I'm not for one moment suggesting that you don't seek them if your child really needs them. What I am suggesting is that we are overusing these terms and we are labeling what is often normal childhood development with therapeutic labels that often kind of fast track us down a therapeutic path, that label that child, lock them into some kind of diagnosis, pathologize normal childhood development. And I think that's not helping us in our parenting or in our family life. And so I just want to give you the opportunity to get off that bus if you're on it. If you're happy on the bus, if it's the right bus for you, if your child's getting the help that they need and you think it's totally A-okay and it makes sense and it works with your intuition, with your instinct, with your gut, with everything you know, with all of your research, with the experts you're working with, then go you. I'm not for a second shaming or, suggesting that it's made up or that it doesn't exist or that it's not helpful. I am not in a position to do that. I don't have the authority to do that. I am not an expert on that subject. What I am an expert on, a little bit, if anything, is on parental mindset, on how we should look at things and view things. And I think that what I am seeing is a certain level of concept creep, where we're taking labels that are justifiable and useful and validated often from things like the DSM, from the world of psychology and psychiatry, from clinical language where it is appropriate. And we are using it in amateur, layman's, parent, day-to-day conversations to label certain behaviors. That's what we're going to be talking about in today's video, not about those cases where the diagnosis has been properly assessed and proven helpful. Labels can be liberating. I'm aware of that. I think for some parents, we need it. Sometimes it's appropriate, but labels, when misappropriated, are disabling. That's what we're talking about here today. So just to be clear, we're talking about how therapeutic language can sometimes pathologize normal childhood behaviors and development. Number 1, sensory seeking. Here's the technical definition. A child who frequently seeks out intense sensory input, such as jumping, spinning, or loud noises to self-regulate or to stay engaged. This is often associated with sensory processing differences or disorders. Now, here's the thing. Many children, if not all children, are sensory seeking, okay? They seek out certain sensory input, physical touch, smells, tastes, experiences. Many children like to jump, like to spin, like to hear certain certain noises, like to touch certain things. Really what we're describing is a curious kid, kinesthetic learner perhaps, someone who learns through touch, through that sensation more than through maybe verbal input. So labeling a child this way is potentially making normal energy, normal curiosity, normal exploration, especially in those early years. Like all toddlers do this. They should do this. It's part of their normal development, is to touch different things to figure out, is it wet? Is it cold? Is it dry? Is it hard? Is it big? Is it little? Does it go fast? Does it go slow? Right? This is all of the things that we talk about inside my Reclaim Play course about the schemas, right? Dumping things out, pouring things back. That's the sensory seeking aspect. And all of us, even adults, even the most kind of sedentary, disengaged adults, are aware, usually, and interested in what we're touching, how we're sitting, the temperature in the room, the speed we're going at, right? This is just kind of, I don't know, part and parcel of being human, I think, right? So there are cases in which there is a sensory processing disorder. But there's also the fact that most kids go through a phase where they find their labels scratchy, or where they only want to wear their pajamas all day, or where they don't want to wear anything tight, or where they want to sit only on beanbags and not on chairs. And that is, I don't know, to me, I've raised 5 kids in my home. I don't think any of them had a sensory processing disorder, or if they did, we didn't diagnose it, but they were all sensory seeking. They wanted to touch the kinetic sand, or they didn't want to touch the foam, or they had interest in exploration. If you label them this way, it makes that normal development feel like it's clinical, like it's disordered, like we need to seek therapy for it. And it often leads to that over pathologizing that I've been talking about, right? Active play, independence, curiosity are good things. And what we actually need to do is provide creative outlets. Inside of Reclaim Play, I really teach you to set up different zones for your children. And one of those zones is a messy zone where they can explore sensory materials, right? Things that are wet, things that are sandy, things that are maybe squishy, all sorts of different sensory inputs. That's not because your child is sensory seeking or needs some kind of diagnosis, but rather because that is part of normal childhood development. Sometimes, and I know I'm, exposing myself as a complete non-expert, a complete amateur here, but sometimes when I speak to my friends who are physiotherapists, who are speech therapists, who are occupational therapists, when I visited their clinics, when I see the types of tools and toys and games they play with kids, I think, wow, this is amazing therapy, and they're obviously helping kids who really need specific developmental milestones and support for those milestones, like learning specific things that they wouldn't necessarily pick up on their own. But sometimes I think this would just be amazing for every kid. That's why I encourage every kid to have an indoor swing at home, to have a movement zone at home, to run and jump and roll and flip and spin and challenge their vestibular system and their balance and their core strength and their hand-eye coordination and their fine motor skills and their gross motor skills. Like, that's something we all want our children to develop. So this does not need to be pathologized. This needs to be catered to. And what you really need to do in this case, in most situations, is not to seek out expert help or therapies, but to design your home in a way that answers those developmental urges and desires, like having movement, imagination, focus, messy zones, quiet zones. These are what are going to help with this and with all the labels that I'm about to go through in this video. Basically, if a child is sensory seeking, they're probably a kinesthetic learner. They're probably a normal, curious, physical kid who experiences the world through their bodies. And what they really need is a movement-rich environment, a sensory-rich environment. And that's something you can provide them at home. Number 2, strong-willed children. Strong-willed children, or oppositional defiant children, are often children who are, they don't like authority. They don't like being told what to do. They want to stand their ground. Let's read the technical definition. A strong-willed child describes a child who is highly determined and resists external control. Oppositional refers to patterns of defiance or resistance to authority. They're often associated with oppositional defiant disorder, or ODD. Now, the thing is that whilst this might be a reasonable label and maybe it's appropriate for some children, in most cases, I think that these labels are pathologizing, autonomy And it just creates a lot of power struggles when you see your child as having oppositional defiance. I have at least two children who really don't like being told what to do. They are fiercely independent. They are strong willed. They want to decide for themselves. They want to have a say. They want to have the last word. They want to talk back to you. They want to say, no, we'll do it differently. They want to be contrarian. And that is, in my opinion, a lot more about their temperament than it is a disorder. This does not need to be pathologized or labeled or treated in the vast majority of cases. In the vast majority of cases, this is something we need to work with. We need to nurture their internal independence and help channel it towards leadership, towards autonomy, towards sovereignty, and away from power struggles and the kind of argumentation that we often get into with kids like this. It's the endless negotiations and the back and forths and the over-controlling and the constant threatening and bribing that isn't really going to work, and it's going to agitate our sense that our child has something wrong with them. You do not want to frame a child like this as a problem. You want to frame them as someone who is developing their independence, who has a point of view, who has a backbone and a spine, who stands up for what they believe in, who speaks truth to power, who stands up to authority. And those are all really good qualities, but they do need to be softened and channeled. They still need to learn to respect their elders. They need to learn manners. They need to learn patience. They need to learn to regulate themselves and to calm down, right? These are things that they need to learn. That's called parenting. This is a child who needs guidance, not a diagnosis. The next one is a deep feeling kid. I'm sure you've heard this one along with the term highly sensitive. Maybe you identify as this yourself. Here's the technical definition: a child with a heightened response to sensory stimuli and emotional input. It's often associated with the highly sensitive person, HSP framework in psychology. Listen, I can totally relate to this label. It's basically someone who emotes a lot, who feels things in a powerful way, who reacts with a lot of emotion, maybe who takes things very personally. But the problem I have with these labels is that it makes it into some kind of diagnosis, some kind of subcategory of human, some kind of special thing that demands something very different than what the rest of children demand. And I don't think that's true. I don't think that's useful. It's not like in medicine where we need to properly diagnose the illness so that we can match the correct dosage of the correct medicine to that person's body. The truth is that most people are on a spectrum of how sensitive they are and how emotive they are. And if children are temperamentally more expressive, right, they're going to be perhaps more extroverted with their emotions, that they, feel things more deeply or more loudly, or sometimes in a more skewed manner than others. What I see on my own self and on my children who would fall into this label is that this is just often kids who need mindset coaching. They need to learn to thicken their skin, to take things less seriously or less personally. They need to learn to move on from their feelings, not to get stuck in them. They need to learn to ride the wave of emotion, and that emotions come and then they go, and they are not life-shattering or altering. They need to learn to talk back to their insecurities or to their sensitivities and say, no, I can handle it, or no, it's not such a big deal, or I'm going to overcome this, or I will face my fears. I think what is really needed here is mindset coaching, bolstering up a child and not giving them this label, oh, you're a deep feeling kid, which sends them the message that they are too much, that they are too fragile, that they simply can't because they were born this way. They're a deep feeling kid. So what can they do about it? It's like, look, I'm probably a deep feeling person. I'm probably a highly sensitive person, but I've overcome that. I have taught myself and trained myself and thickened my skin and strengthened my backbone and broadened my shoulders so that I'm not so fragile and so at the mercy of circumstance and of situation and of other people's comments to me. I've learned to bolster up my confidence and overcome my insecurities and think about myself a bit less. That's the other problem I have with treating kids like they're highly sensitive or like they're deep feeling kids, is that it actually heightens their self-consciousness. And being self-conscious, thinking about yourself all the time, that inhibition is identical to being anxious. Dr. Jordan Peterson talks about this a lot, that when you are thinking about yourself, how am I being perceived? What are people thinking about me? What did they mean? Why did they say that? Why didn't they invite me? Why did they look at me that way? When you're kind of tuning yourself to pick up on microaggressions or on slights, on facial expressions or on tone of voice, and interpreting that as a deep feeling person, as something that means a big deal, then you're not strengthening yourself. You're not overcoming. You're not learning to address those skewed cognitive fallacies, to heal them, and to look at the world in a more robust, resilient, capable way. Number 4, spirited or emotionally intense. A spirited child is one with high energy, persistence, and emotional expressiveness. Emotionally intense refers to children who experience emotions on a heightened scale. So again, if you label your child like that, you're going to see them as exhausting, as difficult. You might fall into cycles of shaming them or suppressing their vitality, right? Kind of trying to extinguish some of that emotion, which can be really overwhelming. But instead, what we really need is to coach them, right? They bring a lot of emotion to life. They feel things very powerfully. They can have big tantrums and deep sadness, but they can also exude exhilaration and excitement. And basically, they just have a very wide range of intense emotions. And what we actually want to help them to do is give them the guidance to become a little bit more even keeled, because emotional volatility doesn't serve us in our life. But it's not a diagnostic label. It's not something that you need therapy for, or that you need OT for, or that you need your parent to give you excuses. Well, she's just a spirited child, so that's just how she is. Yeah, sure. Sometimes that can be helpful as a shorthand to refer to certain temperamental tendencies. But generally, we really need to help that passionate, very fully alive child who brings a lot of energy to our lives to find rhythm, to find predictability, to find stability, and to coach them, right? And help them to calm their emotions, both the highly positive and the highly negative, so that they don't whiplash them all the time, so that they're not on an emotional roller coaster all the time, but rather find a little bit more stability in their lives. And number 5 is neurodivergent, or sometimes high needs. Let's read the technical definition. High needs refers to infants or toddlers who require more soothing and attention than typical. And neurodivergent is a non-clinical term describing people whose brains function differently from what is considered typical, which includes a very wide range, such as ADHD and autism, etc. Now, the issue that I have with neurodivergent as a term is that it's an umbrella term. It means almost nothing because it means so many different things. Even within the diagnostic label of autism, you have a very wide range of symptoms. And I think sometimes when you use a label like this, it can be helpful, like I said, as shorthand, just to kind of, signal to the other person, by the way, my kid's neurodivergent. In other words, don't expect them to behave as other children who are developing normally might behave because they have a diagnostic label. But the issue with that is that it doesn't really help us drill down what are the specific symptoms and challenges that our specific, unique, individual child might need us to cater to and help with. And so, because this is a non-clinical term, it doesn't come with a list of symptoms attached. It doesn't help us understand and adjust our expectations to what that child might need. And many parents use it even without any clinical process whatsoever. So there's no categorization, there's no assessments, there's no testing, there's no experts helping them understand exactly what's going on. They just say, oh, my child is neurodivergent. In other words, their brains function differently. Now, if it's that broad, then it might just be a temperamental issue, right? The truth is that we're all neurodivergent in the sense that we're all individuals, just like our faces are different, our blood is different, our microbiome is different, our DNA is different, and yeah, our brains are different too. Neurodivergence, differences of brain, is part and parcel of being human, right? I don't mean to be tongue-in-cheek or sarcastic about it. I really don't. I'm just saying it doesn't mean that much. It's not very helpful. And I think that's true of all of these definitions. Spirited, high needs, highly sensitive. It just doesn't mean all that much. It's a kind of marker. It's just a way of saying, oh, by the way, like temperamentally, my child skews in this direction, or watch out for, sensitivities. Or sometimes we use it as an excuse why we're not pushing our child harder, why we're not expecting more, why we're lowering our expectations. why we keep increasing support, but, aren't increasing the challenge or the responsibilities or the accountabilities, or sometimes why we're not doing more parenting. I know that for me, these diagnostic labels have sometimes been a crutch and a reason I haven't got in there and done the hard work of setting the boundaries, of following through, of creating rituals, predictabilities, rhythms, positive dynamics, expecting things like respect or like accountability or like taking responsibility or like kindness and thoughtfulness of others. And sometimes that diagnostic label has been helpful. You get the resources or the support that you need, but sometimes it has held me back. Saying a baby is high needs. I mean, yeah, some babies sleep easily, eat easily, aren't fussy, don't cry that much. Some babies have colic. Some babies don't, resist sleep or resist food or don't latch properly. I've had 5 babies and they've been varied and, on a wide range of how, I don't know, easy they are versus how intense their needs have been. So I understand again why that label exists. I just wonder if it helps us as parents to see our baby as a high needs baby. If it liberates you and it helps you and you're just like, well, I have a high needs baby, so I need to answer their high needs, fine. But if it makes you feel disempowered, like, oh, my child has this thing that they're high needs and so they can't overcome, they'll never grow out of it, it's just part of their personality, I would just be a little bit careful, a little bit cautious, proceed with caution with these labels. In my own years of parenting, something I've noticed is that often I will label my child as something in my head. I think, oh, my child is challenged in reading, or my child has poor coordination, or my child's struggling sharing, or my child's really selfish, or all sorts of things that I've thought, sometimes temperamentally, sometimes it's been a label. I've suspected maybe dyslexia, or I've suspected attention deficit disorder, or oppositional disorder, or hyperactivity, or low tone, or whatever it might be. And what I've noticed is that as long as I show up and I attune and I support and I offer the environment and the parental guidance and the step-by-step moving forward, and maybe I consult with a couple of experts and I read up on it a little bit and I just get my head straight and I make a plan, that with those levels of support, it has been enough for my child to overcome. And many times they've completely moved forward. They don't behave like that at all anymore. They don't have those challenges at all anymore. They just broke through. Sometimes I needed the help of a speech therapist or of a play therapist or of an OT or of some new equipment in my home or of a curriculum book or of a CBT workbook. And many of these therapeutic interventions are things that we parents can do ourselves. Now with AI, it's never been easier. You can literally chat it through with ChatGPT and say, my 8-year-old's displaying XYZ. Can you help me understand if this is a real diagnostic label that I should seek help for, or if this is something that I could maybe manage through parental support, through environmental changes in our home, through dietary or lifestyle changes? Often, more often than not, it's going to be the latter rather than the former. And that's why I would caution when it comes to diagnostic labels. I would be aware that they have a downside. There is such a thing as iatrogenic harm. They have a level of self-fulfilling prophecy, of confirmation bias, of locking a child in. They have that level where labeling is disabling, where your child will stoop to your lowest expectations of them or rise to their highest expectations of them. Not always, not with every diagnosis. This may not be applicable with severe disability or with real mental illness, but it is going to be applicable in the vast majority of the cases. And I think that would be better and more empowering for us and more empowering for our children. So next time you see your child doing something that worries you or annoys you, don't rush to the therapeutic, clinical, pathological language to describe it. Don't rush to assume that there's something just wrong with them and that this is how they'll always be and that they need all manner of therapeutic intervention. Just pause for a moment and check in with your gut and give it a moment to see if you can overcome this through parenting, through showing up with creating an incredible family culture. This is something I teach you to do inside of the studio. If you're not on the wait list yet, get on it. It's at highfam.com/studio. And meanwhile, make sure to grab Reclaim Play. Because when you create a household where your child plays independently, they develop so many of the skills that you might be looking for them to develop. Patience, intention, attention, independence, social and emotional skills, verbal development, academic development, literacy and numeracy, fine motor skills, gross motor skills, balance, core strength. All of those things are going to be catered to if you set up your home for independent play and encourage it. Children are designed to play for hours a day. And through play, they get the best, freest, most natural therapy any child could want. That's where they process their big feelings. That's where they learn to overcome challenges. That's where they develop all of these skills that I've mentioned. And it also makes your life so much easier because you don't have to run them around to all these different experts and pay through the nose to get those treatments. There are going to be cases where you'll still need to do that. But I would say that about, maybe 70%, maybe 80% of childhood ailments and suspected diagnoses could be overcome at home by catering to our children through independent play. And of course, through your love and attention, through boundaries, through rituals, through household culture, through family connection, and through a sense of belonging and identity that doesn't pivot on a diagnosis. If this was helpful for you, let me know below. Have you been curious or suspected a diagnosis? Have you sought out therapeutic treatments? Has it been beneficial for you? Have you regretted it? What do you think of the labels that I addressed here? Are there others that you would like me to address? Let me know your thoughts below. I read every comment. And if you want to disagree with me, I would love to hear that. Just do so respectfully. In the next video, I'm going to show you all about how these therapeutic labels might be hurting you, yourself, your self-talk, how you think about yourself. So make sure you're subscribed so that you don't miss that one. I'll see you there. Keep on living that high fam life, and I'll see you in the next video.